We are live. We are live. Hello, hello, everybody. Claire Wasserman here, founder and author of Ladies Get Paid. We are an educational platform, global community, and a book that is all about helping women earn more and live better. I should start timing myself to see how quickly I can say that in one breath.
That was pretty
Today,
good.
yeah, it was pretty good. And if you've been following along for the past, I guess, 2 months now, I've been going live every day. First, it was just myself sharing sort of lessons I've learned in running the Ladies Get Paid community. But then I got quite lonely and bored of hearing myself. So I thought, well, what would be better than inviting other coaches who share our mission, who also want to help women earn more and live better, for them to come on and talk about things that they're particularly excited to share. And so today, I was going to say happy Monday, but I guess it's Tuesday. Happy beginning of a short week. We love these weeks. I'm really excited to have on Jess Wass, who is a career coach and consultant. I would say, and you're going to correct me and go in more detail since you know yourself best, but Jess, her specialty is helping overachievers who feel stuck at work and helping them find lasting satisfaction in their careers and learn to achieve with intention. I love that, with intention. Jess, welcome here today. Before we dive into the focus of today's chat, I would love for you just to maybe flesh out your own intro a little bit and how you got into what you do and why you feel so moved to do it.
Yes, thank you. And it's so great to be with you. I love the Wasserman energy that we have today. That's a fun fact. My real last name is Wasserman. It's shortened for marketing purposes. And I'm excited to be with you. So, myself, you said it perfectly. I'm a career coach and consultant. I spend about half my time coaching individual clients, a lot of founders, executives, mid-career professionals. And then I go into organizations and I help teach them as well so that we can create better workplaces where everyone can thrive and be really intentional about what we're achieving about. And this topic in particular came up because I do work a lot with executives, founders, etc. But my greatest career achievement, I think, is the fact that I actually had a lot of success really early in my career. And at the time, I felt like, oh, I was lucky enough to be so successful in my career. And now at this point, after all the education and learnings and trainings, I'm like, no, there were actually some very specific skills that I was employing that helped me be successful. And in particular, I think as a woman of color, now as I look back on it, it's even more impressive that I was able to achieve so much success so early in my career, given all the biases that I was up against as well. So I like to really pay it forward. And it also works both ways. So literally earlier, I was on a coaching call with one of my clients who's a founder of a startup, and they were working through performance issues they had with an employee, and it came down to around proactive communication, which is one of the things that we'll talk about today as a core skill set of managing up. So for me, it helps everyone when I can go and teach people the core skills around managing up and, like I say, across. It helps people navigate their career more successfully. It helps founders and leaders do their jobs better, and really just helpful for everyone all around. So it's sort of a passion topic of mine. I really like talking about it. And I'm excited to just sort of share the wealth. And I do a lot of these actually workshops for organizations. Their ERGs love to bring me in to talk about this topic as well. So it's sort of like a fan favorite.
Awesome. And I realized I didn't even introduce the topic. I just introduced you. So for everybody, just so y'all know, when I invite coaches on, I don't ask them to speak to a specific topic. I instead say, hey, what do you feel most excited to discuss? What do you want to focus on? And so for Jess, she wrote in, she said, what you're most excited to talk about is how to manage up and across more effectively to build trust, how to develop a positive internal reputation in your organization, and how to position yourself for future promotion opportunities. This sounds like it's pretty specific to somebody who's full-time, who works for somebody else. That being said, I'm sure there are so many skills here that we'll discuss that are transferable if you work for yourself or you're a freelancer. So just beginning with managing up and across, how do you define that?
Yes, great question. And I'll also say, I do think as we talk about this, we're going to see that these skills apply for even folks like us who run our own business. I'm still employing these same concepts, replacing, manager with client. So how do I define managing up and across? I really think about it when I talk about managing up. I really talk about what is the relationship and interaction you have between you and your direct manager or supervisor or their manager. So really people above you in an organization. I add across because I think these same skills should be used when you interact with anyone, in your work life. So the across is really for how do you also deal with people on other teams, people at your level, people at levels lower than you in other parts of the organization. So it's really about how do you communicate effectively with people all across the organization to make your life easier, to make their life easier, to, like I said, build that trust, build their reputation. And the end result of this should be being able to move up in your career in the form of promotions, et cetera.
Awesome. Okay. And what are the first steps to managing up? And if you could give us really specific, tangible examples of how to do that, that would be awesome.
Yes. So when I talk about managing up, I always say if you want to manage up effectively, you need to remember to duck. And duck is an acronym for this framework I created, which is really you need to master discovery, you need to master updating, you need to master clarification, and then you need to keep it going. So we can dive into each of those components, but I'll just quickly define each of those really quickly as well. So discovery is really about how do you really get to know the people you're working with, not just, oh, Claire, she's great, she's nice, but really everyone works a different way. Everybody thinks a different way, and everyone's got different priorities and goals within the context of an organization. So how do you start to put yourself in other people's shoes? It's like using empathy in a different way to really understand how to navigate working with people. I think a lot of folks really think from their mindset all the time, and this is a way to get you out of that and try and put yourself in the shoes of the other person. So that's the discovery piece. Then we have the update, because it's really all about communication. And this is a key piece in how you start to develop that positive reputation, is you want to be mastering what I call the 3 Ps of proactive communication. You want to be proactive communicating around progress, promotion, and problems. You want to create your own narrative. I always say in the absence of information, people will fill in the gaps with their version of the story, and their version will never benefit you. So you want to always control the narrative as much as possible and really create the story for yourself. And then we have the clarify and the clarification, the C part. And that's really about we can't do our best work if we're not clear on expectations and what it is we need to do and how we're supposed to do it. So a lot of times we have a lot of questions when we start to get into the work, and a lot of folks are afraid to ask for help and answers and clarification. So we really need to own that so that we can be effective in our work. And the last piece is keep it going. I throw this in there because they used to complain about us millennials that we wanted promotions so quickly, and now we've passed it down and labeled Gen Z as people want to get promoted quickly. But it's really to capture this, this is not a one-time event and you're like, I did that once, check. It's you have to keep working at this if you really want to develop that reputation that leads to promotion. And in my own career, I really developed this framework because I saw it work in my own career. So I've had several jobs and careers. I always say I've changed careers 5 times in 15 years, but one of my longest stints was I worked at Starwood Hotels for about 5 to 6 years. And in that time period, I was promoted twice. And I was in my early to mid 20s, promoted from manager to associate director to director, all within this 5-year period. And for each of those opportunities, I actually had a senior leader sort of tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, there's this new opportunity. I think you should apply for it. I think you'd be perfect for it. And that's everyone's dream. Everyone hopes that if they sit down, put their heads down, that somebody will notice. And I tell all my clients that never happens. Don't ever wait for that to happen. Be proactive in your career. But it literally happened to me, not once, not twice, because I was really honing these managing up and cross skills. So I say it works. I know it works, but I also use it in all my coaching conversations with my clients, whether it's someone who's in their early to mid-career or, like I said, founders and startup owners and executives, to help them help their teams communicate with them more effectively.
What did you mean by creating the story for yourself?
Yes. So let's talk about these, what I call these 3 Ps of proactive communication. Really, sometimes in any sort of communication, there's always that awkward, I'm not quite sure I understand what's happening on your side. And so we always make up stories all the time. Why did someone respond to our email? Why did they respond to it like that? What did they mean when they said hello? Right? With the 4 exclamation marks. We make up stories all day long about people. This happens a lot when I work with clients who are applying for jobs, and particularly with people who want to transition careers. You never want anyone to make up a story about why you're leaving this and going to this. You want to own that narrative and plant that seed with your version of the story, because I don't know, for whatever reason, I don't know if we have a bias for, we do have a bias for negativity. I do know that from psychology. We have a bias for negativity. So we will make up the worst version of a story about another person, the best version of ourselves. We have those biases. So proactive communication is about, you want to be proactive with giving people progress. I always say the best feeling when you're a manager is not when you have, Claire, I gave you an assignment last week, and now I'm like sitting there waiting, being like, so what's happening, right? People have these fear-based response when they don't know what's happening, when they feel a loss of control. And that's when you get the micromanager who's slacking you every 5 minutes, asking for an update and driving you insane. By being proactive, before you ask Claire, I'm like, hey, Claire, just wanted to give you a quick update. I'm working on X, Y, and Z today. And that thing you asked me for Friday, I should be done by the end of the week. Now you're sitting there, you're like, great. I have no more questions. Sounds like you're on top of it. That starts to build that trust and that positive relationship. And it's going to buy you space from the micromanaging employer, which is what we all want, people off our backs. So that proactive communication, that's the progress piece. The promotions is, we often think that people are paying way more attention to us than they actually are. So nobody's really noticing all the things that you get done. But in our heads, we think, well, I'm not going to talk about this because they can see that I did that. They know I did the good work. They're not paying attention because there's so many other things they're paying attention to. So you want to be the one coming to your boss and saying like, hey, by the way, here are some of the things that I did last week that I just wanted to put on your radar. I had a really great conversation with Rob about what to do with this. So-and-so needed help, so I helped them with X, Y, and Z. I did the thing that you asked for. Then this other team actually asked me for something and I did that too. Now let's talk about what's coming up. They probably didn't know 3 of those 4 things. And now they're like, wow, you're on top of a lot. Or wow, why is Nancy's team constantly bothering you with requests? I didn't know about that. I need to stop that because I have things I wanted you to do. So it's opening up this conversation. And then the last piece is problems. As a manager, you've managed people. You never want to find out about a problem from like someone else, from like a colleague, right? About a problem with your own team. You want your team to bring it to you so you can make sure you're on top of it because it makes you look bad as a manager. So as a person on a team, make sure you're coming to your employer and saying, by the way, there's a problem. Here's what I've already done to try and fix it. Here's what I'm planning to do next. Is there anything else that you think I should be doing differently other than this plan? And that's going to make them look at you and go, oh, you know what? I'm glad you're on top of it. And now we call this service recovery and customer service. When you have like a really angry customer who's like dialing in for customer service and they have such a great customer service experience that now they want to like recommend the company, but it started with a negative. So that's what you can do when you are proactive about discussing problems. You turn a negative situation to something that actually makes you look like the hero.
Nice. Love it. Love it. In terms of managing across and getting to know people, I can already feel resistance from folks going, oh, I don't have time. I can't, do I really need to do this? Is this a priority? And then I think a way to help folks wrap their head around doing this, or at least get them to visualize it, is concretely like, what are sort of reasonable and realistic ways to manage across, right? To connect with your peers. That's not going to now take a bunch of time and energy on your part.
Yes, that's such a great question and really smart on the pushback that we get because our time is so limited. And it's the same thing that comes up when I talk to anyone about delegation, right? That's the central thing. Like, I don't have time to teach someone else about X, Y, and Z. But we know the central argument is like, no, it's not going to save you time today.
Right. Short term versus long term.
Right. And it's the same thing with this managing up. And I don't mean that you have to know, I don't need to know like the name of your cat and everything about your personal life, even though I know Phoebe. But it's getting to know like the important stuff that's going to help you get the work done. So I'm talking about like, I need to understand if I'm working with you, Claire, whether in a client capacity, right? Even from an entrepreneur standpoint, or if we were working together in the same organization, I need to understand like, what are you working on? Like, what are your priorities? That's really important because when I need you to do my thing, I need to know why you're not prioritizing my thing. And I need to be able to then articulate how doing my thing is actually going to help you with your thing. Or just acknowledge that it's not and have a frank conversation about, I know this is not one of your highest priorities. So can you tell me when you can fit this in? Or I need to go up to my manager and say, like, you need to have a conversation with their manager. You all need to figure out priorities because they're working on something completely different that doesn't matter to us. So it's really about you don't need to spend like all this one-on-one time with people, but sometimes you do need to just spend a little one-on-one time with people, or at the beginning of a call, that awkward, when you're joining like a group call and it's just like you and one other person.
Oh my God. I always try to come kind of like at the end, or like
Yes.
as late as humanly possible, solely so that I'm not the only one on the call with another person. Yes.
I am the same way. And now in real time, I'm like, well, you know what? If we maybe think about, it's because we don't know what to talk about. So now I'm going to give everyone something to talk about in that time.
Okay.
Instead of like the weather, today's conversation for everyone is what did you do this weekend? What did you do for Memorial Day? So instead, have a conversation about like, what are you working on, right? What are your biggest priorities right now? What is frustrating you the most? How do you like to communicate, by the way? I remember, hey, Claire, I send you emails all the time. I'm just wondering, is that actually the best way to communicate with you? Like, what's the best way if I need something or I want to ask you a quick question? Those are the questions that are going to get you information that's helpful, that you can use in those awkward 2 minutes while you wait for everyone else. Or I can just set up, I always say, whenever you change jobs, this is exactly, I want you to spend your first like 30, 60, 90 days in any new job, whether it's in the same organization or a new organization, just setting up one-on-ones with people so that you've just established like we already know each other. And you won't retain anything from any of those conversations. And that's okay, because you have no context yet, or at least me. If I don't understand the context of an organization, if we meet in my first week, I'm not going to understand what it is you do and where you fit in. But 3 months from now, when I do realize the role that you play, or someone's like, you should talk to Claire about that, I at least now feel a little bit more comfortable that we met once, that I can go back to you and say, hey, Claire, so, we haven't spoken in a while, but I'm working on this project. I hear that you may know a little bit about it. Can we set up some time to do it? So there's like, I'm an introvert. I don't want to talk to people for the sake of talking. I don't want to make small talk. So for me, having like intentions behind conversations and knowing what information I need to get out of it makes it more comfortable. If I have a mission, if I have a role, I can talk to you all day long. And I can just talk to you because you're friendly, but
yeah, I
not
love
the same
that.
with everyone.
Yeah, I really, again, for those thinking, I don't know, I can get theoretically how this helps, but right now I need to put out fires. So this will be forever deprioritized. Just keep in mind that the only way that you're going to be able to get things done in a way that you feel good about and in a way that propels you forward is with other people. You need their buy-in, you need their support, whether it's them saying, you got this stamp of approval, or it's putting in actual hours to help you, or it's giving you intel, feedback, making something better, right? And the only way you're going to get all that is not at the moment you need it, but if you lay the groundwork of trust. And oftentimes that really is just you asking a good question and being an even better listener. And that person feels
100%.
recognized. Yeah. And then now they trust you, and then they'll share information. And to your point of, in your career, managers, tap, or if other folks tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, there's a promotion, right? Like that's intel. That's valuable intel. That's, how do you learn if not in getting folks to want to share their wisdom and information and access with you? I'm curious if you have any, previous clients you've worked with, or your own, or ERGs, or your own career. If you could give maybe a concrete example of when this experience or this process of kind of managing up and across has worked really well.
Yes. So I'll give you 2 examples. I'll talk about myself first, and then I'll share another client example. But for me, it really crystallized exactly that scenario where I told you, like, people basically tapped me and asked me to go apply for these promotion opportunities. And I was in this role at the time where I needed to work cross-functionally with a lot of different teams. And my role wasn't necessarily central to what they did on the day-to-day. So I had to learn really quickly, how do I get, my success depends on getting information from other people who are not on my team. And I am this new person in this big organization. At the time, I didn't have hospitality experience. People have been in this industry for like a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. And so I really needed to just start to build the foundation. And it's like you said, it's not only asking questions, but it's listening. I was really listening to understand what it is people do, also listening for like, what are their frustrations? Who do they have something positive say about? Who do they have something negative say about? What are they complaining about? Right? And how do I think about how to solve those problems? So, and I was doing this again. I'm an introvert. I'm not like out there shaking hands for the sake of shaking hands. When I'm one-on-one with people, I'm great. I find a lot of people who are introverted if you talk about it in the context of one-on-ones, most people are fine. I haven't met many clients that don't even want to communicate with people one-on-one. Even clients who, are neurodivergent, they're fine in some of these smaller settings. So think about it in terms of it's just relationship building. Get to know this person, what they're working on, et cetera. So when I was at Starwood, I spent the first 2 years working on these cross-functional projects and really listening and starting to figure out, how do I solve bigger problems for these folks based on what I'm hearing the issues are? And how do I start to go to people individually to seed change before I bring people together in a large group? And what this resulted in is I was on a strategy team and on the brand strategy team, and there was a new role that was opening up on the partnerships team. And I was going to be running global partnerships, marketing partnerships for the Sheraton brand, the Westin brand, and the Liberty brand. Sheraton, Westin being huge brands. And those two brands actually sat under two different leaders. And the partnerships role was on a third team. So to get this role, I needed to interview and get approval from the head of partnerships, team number one, the head of the Sheraton brand, team number two, and the head of the Westin and Liberty brand, team number three. I needed 3 senior executives to approve me for a role in which I had zero experience doing. I had no marketing background, no partnerships background, but they had seen me around and I asked good questions and I got things done when I said I was going to get it done. And I was a great communicator and great listener. And when I was understanding what they wanted with partnerships, I listened and helped explain how those skills could help me get this done, right? Partnerships is about negotiations. Negotiations is about understanding what the other side wants. And I've been demonstrating that for 2 years. So a lot of times people get stuck on, I work with a lot of career transition folks. They get stuck on, I don't have skills doing that. Go back to the transferable skills. There's a lot of transferable skills that we have that we often undervalue. So because of that, the head of the Sheraton brand came and tapped me and said, there's a role that's going to be supporting my team. You should apply for it. And then the second time this came around, it was to be chief of staff to the CMO. And once again, they were like, you should go apply for that job. And I was already halfway into the door. And so when people need to hire folks, it's about reducing risk. You want to hire the least risky candidate. Mm-hmm. When you're an internal candidate, especially, I push a lot of my clients, if they want to do new things, do it in your current organization, because you have the benefit of having a reputation, even if it's not in that thing. You can build a positive reputation what you're doing now. You can leverage that a lot easier than coming in from the outside. So for me, it was really about using these skills to build up the trust in the organization. So it felt less risky to hire me than someone off the street, quite frankly. And then with my clients, I went back to the 3 Ps. I had this VP who was at this startup reporting to the CEO, and she was feeling micromanaged. Mm-hmm. And she was feeling like she was being pulled in all these different directions from her boss, the CEO, and feeling like maybe he wasn't as confident in her as she should have been. She's like, I'm doing a lot. People pleaser, so really doing a lot, saying yes a lot. And so we talked about going back to the 3 Ps and owning the narrative so that he understands what is it that you're working on, so you can drive that to a priority conversation, right? Is this higher or lower priority than these other things you asked me to do? You need to drive the promotion conversation. Here are the things that I've been working on that probably aren't on his radar. He doesn't understand all that you're doing. So you need to start to seed that conversation and also be on top of it. You told me this is a priority. Here's what I'm doing to work on this. And then flagging problems that was less of an issue for this individual. After just a couple of weeks of doing this and really getting ahead and being proactive and giving that promotion and progress updates, you start to feel the CEO backing off, more breathing room, getting clearer guidance from the CEO rather than doing 20 things, really forcing them to prioritize and be like, okay, do this and going back to what they said the goals are. And that makes everyone's lives so much easier. It reduces so much stress. Mm-hmm. And that's everyone's goal, right? To not be super stressed out with work.
Right. Would you say because we only have about 6 minutes left and I want to jump into the sort of core tenets of becoming your own champion, which of course is the underlying theme of our talk today, but any other things you might want to share based on managing up and positioning yourself for a future promotion that you haven't shared so far?
I think those are the big things. It's go back to the duck framework, go back to discovery, making sure your update clarification. Let me add a little color here. The biggest things that I think people lack in clarity is, what is the purpose of what you're asking me to do it? How does it relate to the goal? Making sure you understand the why and asking that question. How does this relate to our goals or priorities? Is this more or less of a priority than this other thing? The other thing that people lack a lot of clarity is we often give work to people without clarifying the deadline. It's so simple, but it happens all the time. So making sure whenever you get work, asking when is this due by? And then you can open that up into a negotiation on that due date based on your priorities. And a lot of times, the last place where I see people get stuck is they're not clear on what done looks like. So I get the task, but I'm not quite sure how I'm supposed to be delivering it or what format. So getting clear and asking questions like, what does success look like here? What does done look like? What's that format? And making sure you have clarity there. And then even asking to break down, how do I get from here to there? Let me just walk through the next steps to make sure I'm clear on that. So really being okay having those conversations, and always start by throwing out your own suggestion first and then saying, do you have anything to add? That's how you ask questions without looking dumb. So that's the last thing I'll add on the clarification piece.
Awesome. Yeah. So with every coach we have on for LinkedIn Live, we always ask, what are the biggest, if you had to pick the fundamental elements of becoming your own biggest champion in work, money, and life. And you had quite a few. And I know you could go in and have a webinar or discussion on each one of the things that you said, but, offhand, what would you suggest for folks as they, really work on just in general, making sure they are self-advocating?
I go back to what I learned from watching The Real Housewives, and that is have the receipts. Making sure you keep the receipts. And this goes down to keep your own receipts. A lot of people can't even name for themselves what are the good things they've done. Literally start to write down. I do this at the end of every week. What are the 3 biggest things I accomplished this week? Or the 3 things that I did that are putting progress towards my big goals or I should feel proud about? Because I did this morning to do my May end of month review, and I had no idea what I did the first 2 months of May. Right, and that was 3 weeks ago. So it's very easy to forget what you do. So I have to keep those notes, and then it makes it easier to look back. What did I do this month? What did I do this quarter? And that's the same information you need to bring into promotion conversations, your one-on-ones on a regular basis. Other people won't advocate for you if you aren't clear on the value that you bring. And I think it starts with something really simple, act of writing it down for yourself, having a record of, what are you proud about? What did you accomplish? It builds that self-confidence from a positive psychology standpoint, but it also makes sure you have the receipts to back you up when you're asking for that pay raise. Because we got to get paid, as you know.
Amazing. Okay. Speaking of getting paid, tell everybody where they can find you, follow you, and most importantly, pay you.
Yes. So first place to follow me, you're listening on LinkedIn Live potentially. So I'm very active on LinkedIn like Claire is. So you can definitely find me on LinkedIn. Send me a message there. You can also submit coaching inquiries that way. The second biggest place to find me is my website, jesswass.com, like my name, jesswass.com. You can submit inquiries that way if you want to work with me, whether it's in a coaching capacity or bringing me into your organization to have this conversation in front of everyone, or other tactical skills. Those are probably the 2 best ways. And then I'm on Instagram, jwass24. You can find me on there. It's promoting today's event there as well.
Awesome. Awesome. And I know we have just a few more minutes left. So I would actually love if you could share your process of quitting your full-time job to go into working for yourself. I think it's been relatively recent-ish in the last couple of years. And
yes,
I think, you're your own best guinea pig for the work that you do for others. So yeah, if you could share that transition from full-time for others into full-time for yourself, I think that would be a wonderful way to close.
Yes, I'm a big believer of being open to multiple paths to get to the same goal. And so I even tell, what we're doing today, what I'm doing today, maybe I'll be doing this in 5 years, maybe there'll be a different version of this. So figure out what drives you. And so like many folks, wasn't sure what it is I was supposed to be doing in my career, couldn't quite put my finger on it, and finally had that moment of clarity where I'll be honest, actually, I met you at an event, Claire, about 4 or 5 years ago. And I was like, that's what I want to be doing. I didn't know this type of work was a thing until I saw someone else doing it. And then it was able to be a little bit more clear, I can teach people about all these skills. And what I recognized was I love applying psychology principles to the workplace. So I was like, I'm going to go back and get my master's in psychology. And I found this great program at Columbia, organizational psychology master's. And I just said, I didn't even have any plans after that. It was, I want to do this for me. I want to learn from me. I love this, and I'll see where that leads. And then as I got in the program, I started to get new opportunities. I started to get reassurance from my classmates that we were all on the same page, that all these skills that I had actually had a place. There was a name for it. I was on the right path, and opportunities evolved for me. So I got an opportunity to consult with one of my classmates who was CHRO at a big company, and we signed the contract about a week before COVID hit. And then that contract disappeared. But I had at least already in my mind committed to, oh, I'm going to go try this for 6 months. So even after that contract went away, I said, I'm going to go try this for 6 months. I'm going to see if I like coaching full time, if I like consulting full time. And then after that 6 months, I was like, I'm making progress. Let's see what I can do in another 6 months. And here I am, like 4+ years later. So you don't have to have the end result in mind when you start a journey. What's the next step? Because from that first step, new opportunities open up that you couldn't see from step 0. So that's what I always tell people. What's the smallest thing you can commit to, and just seeing what information experimentation you can do from there.
Love, 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 love. I'm a huge fan of experimentation,
Yes.
especially for those who are watching and you see you're a perfectionist. Okay. It relieves a lot of pressure if instead of looking
Yes.
at the pass fail test, instead it's just an open-ended experiment in which you
Yes.
always win if you learn. Okay. So if you learned, you won.
100%.
And it is funny that you mentioned, coming to one of my events saying, oh, I want to do like this, because I figured out my next step at the beginning of Ladies Get Paid was after hosting one event. And afterwards, a friend said, you should do this, and just sort of like motioned
Right.
to the room, and it was really fun to figure out, well, what does this actually mean? How does it get manifested? How does it get monetized? What does it feel internally and extra, so it's like, what are all of the elements required to kind of take this and harness it and then sustain it and monetize?
And you've had a lot of different iterations along the way too, which just goes to show, again, like, you don't have to have it all figured out, but you took this and you're like, well, what about this? And got some feedback and then added and subtracted from there. So experimentation, I call it mad scientist method. 100% we're on the same page. That's the best way.
I love that. Yeah, it's, and I know we're at time. Can I keep you for one more minute?
Yes.
Okay. Something that I find very interesting in this season of life is, and this is relevant to what we're talking about today in terms of when you're managing up and across and positioning yourself for promotion, when you work for somebody else. I'm not saying it's easy, but at least there is a pretty definable thing that you are figuring out in relation to, right? The thing being the company you work for and the people you work with, etc. But when you work for yourself, okay, then you start negotiating with yourself, right? You're like, how do I manage up here? How do I position for myself for promotion? What does growth look like? And then on top of it, it's not just having a company and potentially dependents, right? People who work for you, but also a community. There are people who are literally looking to you and waiting on you, and you want to evolve and grow, but you got to bring those folks with you. Like, where do they fit in? So I am finding, again, in this kind of like, and I should just back up and say, all my previous jobs when I worked for other folks, I only did 1.5 years. I was like very stereotypical.
Right, in and out.
Yeah, just 1.5 years, like pretty on the nose. I've been doing Ladies Get Paid for almost 6 years. This is the longest place I've ever worked. And I find it to be, it's not a different calculus necessarily in terms of figuring out how you want to grow and what does like positioning yourself for a promotion look like, but there are nuances of considerations that
100%.
need to be factored in that I find a little bit just fraught with other kinds of pressures.
There's a lot of pressure in owning and first of all, in making money for yourself. There's a lot of pressure, right? We could have a whole nother LinkedIn Live and series about those. And I think something that's helping me along the way, because there's a lot of pressure of like, you could do this. There's a billion things that I could do, right? Each of us could do on a daily basis. And something I did early on that I think is helpful is creating like my values, which when I heard in the past, I'm very like, I have a negative reaction to things that sound woo, but I embrace them. So at first it's like values is like, okay, whatever, I roll. But really, like, what is most important to you at this time period? And recognizing like that changes and evolves, right? As we get older, as we're starting to think about like having families, that's another point to check in and saying, well, what's important to me at this moment, and feeling permission to change, right? And I think that's hard when you've built a brand and a company and feeling like, well, can I change? And really thinking about it, but it goes back to like, what do you want and need? And then thinking in the context of of your company and what you've created, and how does me changing, has this support that? And can I bring on other people to fill the roles that like are no longer important to me? Or do I just start to change things a little bit? And being okay with that, because at the end of the day, we're creating things to help other people. but we have to make sure it services us first.
Right.
Because we know that we're no help to other people if like we're dying, if we're martyrs along the way. We built this business for ourselves, for our freedom, right? Flexibility could be financial freedom as well. But I always say if it doesn't work for you, don't work on it.
Nice.
Especially when you have your own business, it has to work for you. Otherwise, let's get that consistent paycheck and that healthcare that's not costing me $1,000 a month.
Right. You might as well, if you're going to suffer anyway, you might as well do it with the security.
With the security.
You have a paycheck, right, from somebody else. Yeah, super interesting. Really want to do
a whole nother, this gives you an idea of another topic, right?
Oh yeah. Well, good thing is my goal is to do these every day if I can. So we'll certainly have you back. Thank you, Jess, so much for being here. Thanks to everybody for watching. Best of luck. Now go get paid.